All right, today we're tackling a really interesting one. It's one of the earliest and maybe one of the sharpest works by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. It's called The Holy Family. And you know what? It's basically where they declared all out war on their old friends.
So, right off the bat, that title makes you go, wait, what? Who is this Holy Family? And you gotta wonder, why would Marx and Engels write an entire book just to go after them? What was the big deal? Well, to really get it, you have to see this book for what it truly is. This isn't just some dry philosophical text. It was the first shot fired in a massive intellectual feud. This was a takedown, plain and simple. Okay, so let's be super clear here. We are not talking about a literal family. The Holy Family was actually a sarcastic nickname, a jab that Marx and Engels came up with for a group of their former buddies, a philosopher named Bruno Bauer and his whole circle. And these guys were famous for this really specific, kind of high-minded philosophy they called critical critique. And get this book, which they wrote back in 1844, is actually the very first time Marx and Engels ever worked together. It's their debut album, if you will. And what's the first thing they decide to do as a team? Publicly and totally demolish their old philosophical crew. So, what exactly was it about these guys that got them so worked up?
So, yeah, what was this critical criticism all about anyway? I mean, to really understand why Marx and Engels were so fired up, we've got to get inside the heads of their opponents and see the world the way they saw it.
Okay, so at the heart of it all was this philosophy called speculative idealism. Now, that sounds complicated, but the core idea is pretty simple. They believed that abstract concepts, big ideas they called spirit or self-consciousness, were the real engine of history. The actual material world, with real people and real problems, to them, that was kind of secondary. It was all about the ideas. And this quote right here, wow, it just perfectly captures how they saw the world. They thought history was made by a handful of brilliant, elite thinkers, these vehicles of the spirit. And everybody else, the masses, they were just inert material, basically dead weight, being dragged along through the historical process. Ouch.
And here you can really see the two worldviews clashing. It's like night and day. On one side, you've got critical criticism, where abstract spirit is more important than actual people, and a few smarty-pants critics are way more important than the masses. For them, history is all driven by pure thought. But then you look at what Marx and Engels are arguing, and it's the total opposite. The real person comes first, not some abstract spirit. The masses aren't dead weight. The masses are history. And what drives it all isn't just thinking. It's the real material conditions people live in.
So you can see why they had a problem with this. They saw this whole philosophy as completely detached from reality and pretty elitist, too. So Marx and Engels wrote The Holy Family to be their big, definitive counterattack.
And this book is a huge deal. It's really the turning point. This is the moment they officially ditch their idealist past and start laying the groundwork for what would eventually become materialism and communism. It's a complete 180 in their thinking.
And believe me, they do not hold back. Right from the get-go, in the introduction, they point their finger directly at the target. They call this speculative idealism the most dangerous enemy to real humanism because it shoves the real living person aside in favor of these abstract ideas like spirit. For them, this wasn't just some minor disagreement. This was a battle for what philosophy should even be about. Now, what's so cool about this book is how they fight this battle. This is not some stuffy academic paper. Their main weapon? Satire. They just completely deconstruct their opponent's arguments using logic, but also just relentless mockery. And their method was brilliant and devastatingly simple. They would literally just quote these huge, long passages from the young Hegelian's own journal and then step back and show everyone just how bizarre, how tangled up, and how completely out of touch with reality their writing was. They let them hang themselves with their own words. And boy, do they have a lot of material to work with. I mean, just listen to some of the phrases they pulled out to make fun of. You've got stuff about a dove that goes chirp,
chirp in a philosophical text, or these totally meaningless concepts like popular organic publicism. By just holding this stuff up to the light, Marx and Engels made their opponents sound absolutely ridiculous, without even trying that hard. But it wasn't just the flowery, weird language they went after. It was the substance, too. They took aim at something they called critical history, which was basically a version of history where you just bend the facts to make them fit your fancy theories. This table is a perfect example of what they were doing. You'd have critical criticism making these claims that were just factually wrong. They'd say things like, oh, factory towns existed before the factories were built. Which, what? Or that the working day was 16 hours, when English law had already limited it to 12. Marx and Engels just had to point to what was actually happening in the real world, and the whole argument just fell apart. But maybe the most savage technique they used was showing how criticism would deliberately twist the words of other thinkers just to make their own arguments look better. And the best example of this was how they treated the French socialist Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. So, check this out. Here's the version of what Proudhon said after it was translated or, mistranslated by their opponent. It sounds so timid, right? I do not wish, I wish for nothing but. It makes him sound like he's politely asking for something, not demanding it.
But then, you look at what Proudhon actually wrote. The original French word is demand. And that doesn't mean I wish. It means I demand. All of a sudden, he goes from being a passive wisher to an active revolutionary. Just by showing the original French, Marx and Engels completely exposed the trick and gave Proudhon's Whatums their power back.
Okay, so why are we talking about this nearly 200-year-old philosophical smackdown? It seems obscure, right? Well, because underneath all the satire and the old-timey references, the Holy Family is actually a super important moment in the history of ideas.
I mean, the legacy of this one book is huge. For one, it's the very first time Marx and Engels teamed up. But more than that, it's their big public breakup with the whole school of German idealism. And this is really crucial. It's where they start to really flush out the idea that it's the working class, the proletariat, that's the real engine of historical change. This book is a massive stepping stone to everything that came later.
When you boil it all down, the book's main point is this. History isn't changed by some brilliant, abstract ideas that philosophers dream up in their armchairs. Real change comes from the ground up. It comes from the real-world struggles of real people. And that leaves us with a question that feels just as urgent today as it did back in 1844. Can you really change the world just by changing how people think? Or does it take a revolution in our actual material reality? That's the fiery debate Marx and Engels kicked off with this book. And honestly, it's a debate we're still having right now.